coming to join us to talk about her past life and her current life. We've got Soleil Diamond, CEO at Sterling Technology, and Alan Josen, CEO from Agilitech, and Julian Forjan, who is a crack SDR at SkyTide. Carrie, do you want to take the audience through a real quick background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much. First of all, thanks for inviting me to participate in this. For those of you who do not know, Tracy and I are actually sisters. I started a cold calling company for MSPs in 2014. Tracy joined me in 2015, and then we were absolutely unstoppable. By 2017, we were the 25th fastest growing company in Canada. We expanded into the US. And we worked with companies like Huntress to help them grow their SDR teams. And we worked with somewhere over 500 and somewhere under 1,000 MSPs in that time. Between Tracy and I, we've trained over 300 SDRs, both for our own company and for MSPs. Alan was our MSP in Las Vegas. And Soleil is just a general all-around great person. You may know her from events like like IT Nation, where she was part of MSP CFO before taking the helm at Sterling. And I don't know Cody very well, but he seems like a nice guy.
Cody runs all things webinar here at Huntress. He is the one that keeps the ship sailing. All right. Oh, Jaredson didn't know we were sisters. So I'm keeping an eye on chat. I'm going to bring questions in to the team. So you guys don't need to worry about chat. I will keep an eye on it and bring forward any questions for the audience today. We're going to run some polls. We're not going to do that right away. Cody's loading those up for us. But I want to talk a little bit about how do you get started? So before we get into how does it work at an MSP, like how do you decide who to hire? What does an SDR look like? What kind of a personality do you need to have? Carrie, can you talk a little bit about how we recruited in the very early days of Managed Sales Pros?
Well, back in the day, we kind of worked with anybody that would work with us, like most companies did. We didn't really have a process. Our turnover was very high. As you can imagine, not everybody wants to pick up the phone and dial it 100 to 150 times a day. So as we matured as a business, our recruiting process also matured, and we ended up hiring an organization to do a personality profiling of our best performing agents, which Tracy and I both failed, which is interesting because Tracy holds the record for the most MSP sales appointments ever scheduled in one day. And if I'm not mistaken, it was 8.
Was 8.
8, which is like if we get 4 on a good month, that was amazing. So for Tracy to get 8 in one day, that should tell you what a rock star she is. So what we found through that profile, because we were thinking if we could get people who were kind of good at sales in maybe not a B2B environment, but somebody who was in more of a boiler room that wanted to transition into more of a professional cold calling environment, that they would knock it out of the park. And it turned out that the people that are excellent at being SDRs aren't necessarily the people that you want in a different sales role. The one thing you really want is service orientation. You want somebody who's going to cross the T's, dot the I's, pay attention to the details, because you very rarely are going to call somebody and they're going to say, oh yeah, no, I'm looking for a new MSP right now. We have 100 endpoints and we spend $250 a seat. Like that just never happens. So you're going to have to nurture the opportunities. So you want somebody who's going to be on top of that. So you're not really looking for the person that can do the one call close. You're looking for somebody who has a high tolerance for tedium and gets excited when everyone wins.
Excellent. All right. I think we're going to pop the first poll question up, and it's around who owns sales prospecting in your MSP. So if you guys in the audience and even on the panel want to go ahead and answer this question. Oh, I don't think I can answer it, so I can't vote.
I tried to answer and it says I can't.
You can't vote. Apparently,
okay.
We are skewing the stats if we vote. So the question is like, who owns it? So Alan, I'm going to get you to answer this question live for us. Who owns lead generation at Agilitech?
I'd say the leadership team at this point. right? In the journey that we're at, we're an 18-year-old MSP, have gone through different journeys, right? And I've outsourced sales leadership to some extent to other people, and I've tried that. But currently, what I find works best based on our size is that we handle it as a leadership team. I have a director of sales that, owns the numbers, but effectively we meet as a team and strategize around that.
Okay, and that means you're wearing a couple of different hats. So you're running a business, you're also doing owner-led sales or leadership-led sales. What kind of time does that take out of your day? It sounds like you've got a process which you follow, which we love, but tell me a little bit of the amount of time the leadership team spends prospecting.
On the sales. Well, where I'm at in my current journey, right, 18 years in, is honestly, I like the sales component. So that's the hat I choose to wear, right? I don't deal with operations, I don't deal with finance, I don't deal with the other components. My hat is revenue generation and strategic partnerships and large clients. And so we segment it from that standpoint, but I've always enjoyed meeting with clients, and I look at that as my sales opportunities, whereas the director of sales does the hunting. So honestly, I would say maybe 80% of my time is based on revenue generation,
Okay.
but that's
And
my choice. So
and it's working well for you.
yeah, absolutely.
So Lay, you're in a different kind of environment than Alan. You're in a PE-backed MSP. You've got a large team internally, as well as a large group of Lyra operational companies around you. Tell me a little bit about who owns the lead generation at Sterling.
Yeah, so the beauty of being backed by Lyra, we are a decentralized business. So we have the ability to run it the way that we see fit, which best supports our clients and our community and our employees. So before I hired anyone in sales, it was actually me who was responsible. And we do have now a senior business development rep, and he now is in charge of the lead generation. And I come in and assist like Alan. They'll schedule the first time appointments, and then I'll come in for the second and third. And I just want to just give you a shout out. Wow, eight.
Well, I think that sometimes we forget that those 8 opportunities, and this is something we'll probably chat a bit about today, it wasn't 8 one-call closes.
Right.
Right. So absolutely, I am tenacious, but I also believe that if you follow a process repeatedly, time after time after time, which we're going to talk about today, that success will happen. The question is, when will it happen? And you
Right.
can get good as an SDR. And Julian, we probably talk about this for a second. You can get good as an SDR to get a feeling for, we used to call it, when's it going to drop? When is that appointment going to drop into the slot and become that first time sales appointment? Julian, in your SDR role, how much of a process are you following? Because for you, that's your whole job.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say most of it is a process, right? You're not just calling somebody and asking for an appointment, unless it's one of those situations where you mentioned, the pin drop per se, where you call them and, oh, I have 100 endpoints. I'm looking for somebody right now. That's not how it goes. So you're calling these people and you're asking, the big ball questions that are going to help you find their pain points and whatnot. And most of it is a process that's going to get you to the appointment.
Everything is step by step by step. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll and take a look at the results to see what the audience is telling us about their environments. Cody's going to close them and they're going to pop up somewhere, I believe. There we go. All right, so we've got 35% owner leadership, 15% have dedicated SDR, BDR, 25 in sales manager, team led, 11% of a little bit of everything, and 14%, which is lower in all honesty than I thought it would be, in no one owns it consistently. I'd love to talk about that one. What happens to anything when no one owns it? Carrie, if nobody owns it, what happens?
This is a story I like to tell. When Tracy and I started in the US, we made up an IT company. It was called Everywhere Managed, and it managed 0 endpoints. And we put up a landing page in any city we were training our new callers in. So that way nobody ever got stuck with the new guy. And the number of people that remembered the name of the business that called them and the name of the company that showed up to meet with them is 0. Right? By the time that meeting shows up 2 weeks later, they remember that they're going to meet with an IT company, but they don't remember who the IT company was. So quite often, if you're calling outbound and you get somebody who's talking to you and it sounds like they think they know you, what you've done is just taken advantage of somebody else's 9 months of calling, because I'm not going to correct them. So when no one is making consistent follow-up activity, the odds that one of your competitors could just right call, right day, right time, and scoop that right out from underneath you is very high. Everybody is trying to get the same business as you. You know, there's a finite amount of the market that is viable for a managed services contract, and we're all calling them. So you've got to be on top of it. If they say, call me back November 2nd, you call them back November 2nd. If no one owns it, November 2nd just comes and goes, and Carrie gets it. Or Tracy, probably.
Probably. And just because I'm there when the phone rings, Keith just popped in the chat. By the way, when your meeting is at an event, like a sporting event, and you send the limo service to pick up the prospect, no one cancels. That's fair. I would go to that event. It would be called sports ball in my world. All right, I want to run a poll really quickly so we can get into a chat about, oh, there you go. Here we go. Which funnel drives the most opportunities for you today? So Carrie, you kind of talked about opportunities can come from almost anywhere, but how are we generating leads right now? Is it inbound? Is it cold outbound? Are you using relationships? Have you got partnerships with vendors? Are you like I am? I'm live from CMIT annual conference today. So are you getting leads from events, or do you not track any of that today? So let's get that running in the background. So I think that this would be a good opportunity to talk a little bit about, over the course of events where you've spent a lot of time at, how much prospecting, when you were on the vendor side, how much prospecting were you doing at an event versus the way that you would appear at an event now as an MSP?
Wow, those were the good old days too. I had so much fun. So when we went to an event, there were so many people we connected with and lead scanned. So a lot of them were warm, right? Because we met with them, they said, please reach out to us. So I wasn't doing a lot of prospecting then, but then there's always that time frame in between conferences. Who's doing what? So I would have to prospect and pick up the phone when I was in the vendor role, and I'm just calling whoever was in the CRM, not whoever, but everything's designed, right? There's a pipeline, and so we're not calling anybody cold at that point. But now, being on the MSP side, we're really focusing on outbound with prospects that we have relationships with. So my new biz dev rep, he's actually on his 4th day, and his 2nd day, he reached out and said, I've got 5 meetings scheduled. One of them I'm going on site right now. And this is a rep that has great hunter experience, but no MSP experience. I gave him all the information that I needed to give him, and he did something amazing that I've not seen. Like, I didn't even do it myself, but what he did was he created a PowerPoint of discussion points to make sure he follows when he talks to these people. That was very impressive. Like, he's at a meeting right now with one of those people. So that's why I was so shocked when Carrie said you got 8. I'm thinking, wow, okay, so Luke, his 2nd day in, he got 4 meetings and 2 on site. And I mean, it's just keeps going. But anyway, so we are focusing on outbound, right? Outbound reach, but we do have a good amount coming in via SEO. So we get about maybe 3 a month, people reaching out to us via our website saying, we're interested in talking to you about X. So.
Okay, excellent. I got a question asked in the chat and I half answered it. Daniel, go ahead and put that into section number 1 for inbound. You were asking about referrals in the chat. You can go ahead and add that to section 1. So you just said something really interesting, which is your rep did something unexpected.
Yes.
And how often do we see that happening? So Julian, you've got a pretty strong process to follow, but how much leeway as an SDR do you have to kind of color outside the lines a little bit?
So I think that really depends on what company you're with. I'm not with a huge company, so my leadership, I think, understands that they took me on as a sales professional, as someone that has experience doing this. So they just kind of, trust what I'm saying and what I'm doing. And as long as my numbers prove my actions, I suppose, then I'm given a decent amount of leeway.
What do you think the most interesting thing you've ever done to bring a meeting across the line would be?
That's a great question. I am a huge like in-person networking, you can feel their vibe and just kind of tell the energy per se. So those are always, I guess, my favorite ways of networking. In terms of the most interesting way I've brought about something like that, it was at a fountain party and we're like all in tubes and going swimming, and then you just pretty much networked. I connected with I'm blanking on her name, it was so long ago, but she's like the See Something Over Bank, and just a great connection, and people buy from people they like. So
That's probably the biggest piece that I was hoping that you'd bring up organically for us, Julian. People buy from people they like.
And trust.
And trust. So
yes.
Alan, you've done work with my SDR team at Huntress. You've done a huge amount of work with Carrie and I back in the Managed Sales Pros days. Why do you think it's important to educate SDRs on the industries they're calling into? So you worked with my team when I was in Vegas last year and really drilled down into some of the work. Of course, we prospect 2 MSPs here at Huntress, but you worked with us to help us understand the industry. Is it important to know about the type of companies you're calling into?
Yeah, I'd say that's critically important, especially in calling into the MSP industry or as MSPs calling into other industries. If you have no context, things can go in the wrong direction, right? I think when I was talking to your SDR team, it's reflecting back on how I, as an MSP owner, would stay on the call, right? Like that was their main thing, is what would make you stay on the call. And it's the same thing conversely as cold calling from an MSP into a client. How do you establish, you only have a few seconds, right? And I'm telling the experts here, right? Like this, I'm not a cold calling expert at all. All I know is how I feel when somebody calls me and what would make me stay on the call. I actually hired a cold caller that made me stay on the call, right? He cold called me and he was working for a low voltage company, funny enough, but he was so good on the phone and wasn't too aggressive that I ended up hiring him as a sales development rep. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I think you have to know how to establish relationships and get people to effectively like you in a way, right? In order for them to stay on the call. Industry knowledge is important, but I don't know that that's the key piece either, right?
Excellent. So let's go ahead and close down the poll, Cody. And we heard 2 things from both an SDR and a business owner in the same way. It isn't necessarily about the business knowledge of who you're calling. It's, are you able to create rapport? Carrie, when we used to run the training session for SDRs, we talked about rapport versus trust and the difference. And we had a really great meme. And if I had been thinking ahead, I would have brought this with me on the road because it's in an old deck that I can't access. And it was a film strip, a comic strip. And it said, you have 5 apples and Bob takes 2 apples away. What are you left with? And the answer was trust issues. If you can't deliver what you say you're going to deliver on the phone, you have what, Carrie, 10 seconds before somebody hangs up on you if they're not interested in talking to you, if you're lucky?
Depends. If you're calling New York, you might have 5.
That's true. And you should drop an F-bomb in the first 2, and then you might get to stay on the phone. All right, so Cody, I'm sorry, you popped the results up, but I didn't, there we are. All right, so we've got a mix. We've got inbound, So this one's split pretty well across. I can't do math that well, but events or trade shows was the least amount, which makes sense for the audience in hand today. Carrie, talk through inbound SEO. You have become a bit of a subject matter expert in that space over the course of the last couple of years, which was talent that we didn't really have when we were running cold calling at Managed Sales Post in the early days. Talk about the importance of SEO for cold calling.
Ooh, so ChatGPT and I have become experts in cold calling, by the way, or no, pardon me, in SEO optimization. When you're combining any other modality with cold calling, it's going to be more effective. The first thing anybody is going to do when you mention the company that you're calling from is Google your company. So if your competitors are paying to SEO against you and you're buried on page 3 because you're not writing any organic content, you're not optimizing any of your content, and you're not doing Google AdWords to bring your own company name up to the top of the Google searches, you're going to have more challenges than somebody who is actually investing in both organic and paid search. There is no one methodology that's going to succeed 100%. You need to combine them. And to figure out what the right ratio for your company is, you're going to have to experiment.
Excellent. And there was a great question in chat for outbound. And Garth says, when outbound prospecting, is the advice to offer managed services, which is a bit broad, or do you narrow it down to perhaps cyber awareness training, email protection, or something security driven? And I think the answer to that, Garth, is don't offer anything. Find out what they're doing and what they might need. If you go in pitching cyber awareness training and they don't want that, you're dead in the water. If you go in talking about managed services and they're confused by that, you're not going to move forward in that conversation. They are going to turn off because they don't understand. No one buys anything when they feel foolish. That is probably the biggest thing that I learned early in my cold calling days that was stopping me from moving forward. When we first joined the managed services, Carrie, I don't know, I haven't told the story in a long time, but I had no idea what managed services was when I started cold
I
calling.
still don't.
So Leigh, would you like to share with us what managed services is, or maybe somebody in the audience could help Carrie explain that?
Oh, here's my joke. I always just tell people when I entered the space, the channel, I could spell MSP, and that was it.
Yeah.
I think I can still spell MSP.
Yes. So in order to do this, I had to create rapport. And I like to think I'm pretty funny. So I use a lot of humor. She's not that funny, says Carrie. That's not true. 8 calls in one day. Just let's go back to that. I'm kind of funny, but I try to find, Garth, when you were prospecting, find some sort of shared commonality. If I messed up on the phone, which happens, I still do it today when I mess up on live webinars. I go, oh, I haven't had my coffee yet. Let's start over. And I own the mistake and I come back and I start the conversation again. That's one of the best ways that I've ever had to create rapport on the phone really quickly. Pick something common. Hey, it's Monday. Have you got your coffee yet? This is a cold call. Or it's Friday. What have you got planned for the weekend? Like, try to have a conversation that has nothing to do with what you are trying to sell them in the long run, because you're not selling them on the call. You're beginning to get to know them.
I was going to say, Tracy, that's so true. And, when you're cold calling versus being on a Teams or a Zoom meeting, before the virtual, the blur and the virtual backdrops and all that, and you can see people's backgrounds and you can see pictures of their kids. Maybe they hiked Mount Everest or any mountain or, whatever, right? And there's a commonality. Everybody has some kind of sports memorabilia behind them.
Yeah.
I don't right now. But you always bring that up and that's how you connect. And I always, still to this day, right? We're always still selling something. Alan, wouldn't you agree? No matter what title you have, you're always still selling something. And I like using the dating analogy. The first cold call, it's like speed dating. You're checking to see if you want to continue dating that person or not. And then you go on your first coffee date, and then you have a dinner date, and then another dinner date, another dinner date. And then I always say, when I was selling MSP CFO, listen, we're going into a trial period right now. you're speed dating, you're deciding if you want to go on a dinner date with me. And then after that dinner date, I use this like, I'm not asking to leave my toothbrush at your house, so to speak, right? We're still just dating. Let's see if you want the product. Let's see if you want our service. And everybody understands that. And they just remember that. They might talk to 5 or 10 other sales reps in any given moment, but they remember how I made them feel. And that's something that I always want to add as well. People don't care what you know. They don't remember you that way. It's just how you made them feel. If you made them laugh and you made them have a good day, they'll remember that. So
Okay.
the connection is very important.
Julian, I want to talk a little bit about your training and the process and coaching that happens for you. So do you have a set series of questions? You've gotten past rapport, you're now having a conversation, you're doing your discovery. How do you stay on track on calls? How do you make sure that you get the information you need? How do you ensure that you write that down in the proper place and move it forward down the pipeline? What kind of process is that for you?
Yeah, it's all in the CRM, right? I've always heard, like, as long as I've been in sales, which is pretty much my whole working career, if it's not in the CRM, it didn't happen. That's your lifeblood, CRM and your calendar. So there is, for the most part, a structure, right, on the information that you're looking to get from somebody. Ultimately, it's coming down to charisma. There'll be those days where everybody will give you everything you ask for, and then there's days where nobody wants to talk to you, and no matter what script you follow, it's not going to work. Generally, it's pretty structured. You know what you're going in for. You know what you need during your speed date to see if you want to have the next dinner date. So.
Okay. So it sounds very systematic, what you're doing.
Yeah.
Carrie, you've trained, like we said, we've trained over 300 SDRs in our career. What is the most important part of that process?
Following it.
Yes. See, I know Carrie so well. I knew what she was going to say.
You don't, I mean, we obviously are invested in this answer. We have a process that we have developed using 5 million data points for outbound managed services calling. Alan's using it at his MSP. Julian uses it at his MSP as well. But you don't necessarily need to adopt ours, provided that you adopt a process and follow that process consistently. It's when you start making, Ian always says the road to hell is paved with exceptions. Or like, well, I'm not going to do it this way this time, or I'm not going to follow the process this time. Like, if you trust the process will produce the outcomes. It's when you start saying like, oh, or prejudging, like, oh no, they'd never take my call. Oh, that's one thing I loved about working with outbound agents that were just starting their careers. They didn't know the difference between Joe's Chicken Shop and Deloitte, right? If it was on the list, they called them. There was no fear. There was no prejudging. They didn't know what kind of company it was. They just called the number in front of them, and then they called the next number in front of them, and they allowed people to decide for themselves whether or not they would or would not be interested. Don't cherry pick. Follow your process.
If there's one thing that I would love to automate is the doing of the task, not the tasking, ensuring that that task gets done. I probably still now, even in my role, I'm looking every day at tasks that might be overdue. Because if you can't phone someone back the day you said you would, how could you ever earn their business?
Alan, how does MSP sales process handle that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely reminders, and I had to get dragged into process, right? Like as an owner, I was pretty much anti-process growing up, right? As I was growing the company, and the people involved would know the term muscle and feel, right? And I was a big muscle and feel kind of person, and I was good at it. But once you reach a certain size, it's like, and you want somebody to replicate what you're doing, good luck without that process, right? And they can't just make things up. So yeah, big believer. The processes that I've learned from Carrie and Ian have been helpful, and we've customized it to fit ourselves, right? And the the team likes it, right? I'm still not a good process person, but I've surrounded myself with process people, and I understand the importance of it. So I'm a believer.
If you don't follow process, it falls out of the funnel.
Mhm.
And then you have to go warm it up again. There are only so many at-bats out there. If you do the
Yeah.
hard work to get to stage 2 or 3 of the speed dating, as so they called it earlier, and then you let it die, you've got to start that process again. And it's extraordinarily hard to warm people up. Data hygiene for anybody in the audience is probably the biggest piece of the puzzle. Cody, go ahead and put the next poll up. It talks about how you describe your approach to prospecting. And that's a little bit of what we're discussing here. Let's see what the audience has to say about how they manage their prospecting and their sales processes. For me, we do, so Carrie, when you and I used to onboard callers, we would have them on the phone on day 1 in the afternoon. It
Oh
was
yeah, I don't want to
first
train
thing.
anybody who's afraid of the phone. I want to I don't care if they have a terrible day and trip all over themselves. I want to make sure that they're not afraid of picking up the phone, and then I will invest all the time in the world in them.
Yeah. Julian, while we're waiting for those poll results to come up, talk a little bit with me about call reluctance. So what Carrie is talking about, that's what we call it at Huntress. Call reluctance is the one thing that will kill an SDR. It doesn't matter how great you are. If you are afraid to pick up the phone, you're never going to make a cold call. So Julian, talk about your early days as an SDR. Did you have that problem in the beginning, and how did you overcome it?
Absolutely. Especially going into a position that somebody was in before you. You know, you're working these accounts and there's notes in them already where they just talk about this whole negative experience that they've had with these people. Um, and I mean, to get over it, you just kind of have to do it. You're a completely different person. So naturally, going back to charisma, it's completely different, right? I'm gonna have a complete different tone. I don't know who I'm talking to. I'm just kind of calling, trying to figure stuff out. I'm gonna get a completely different reaction than the last person did. So it's kind of just like you have to shrug the thought off and just do it.
Sure. What do you do? And this is sort of a broad question. Carrie, don't answer first because I know your answer. When you get the angry person, we used to call them FODs. I can't tell you what that stands for because we are on a live webinar, but ask me in the background and I'll let you know. When you come up with the buttholes, I think is the phrase we were using in the back of the chat room earlier. Like what do you do when the person on the other end of the phone is rude, is difficult? What do you do, Julian, in that moment? What process do you follow
Yeah.
when that happens?
Well, there's two routes, right? Either they already hung up on you. That's normally how it goes. The second route is they've given you enough time to lean in and ask. It sounds like you've had a bad experience. Mind if I ask why? And just get them talking, right? You got to open the door.
Alan, what about you? If you come across something that isn't referral based, someone who knows someone who maybe knows someone, what do you do when it doesn't go the way that you want it to in the initial prospecting process?
I think I'm at a place in the business now. If you don't sell everybody, right? Not everybody is a good client, and in the end, why waste your time on somebody that's not going to be receptive, right? And I'm not going to try to convince somebody that doesn't want to be convinced. So if it's an aggressive interaction and they truly don't want to be there, I'm not here to convince them. Honestly, that's my take on those.
Yeah, Soleil, I think that I've seen you do this actually in person places where you have stepped away and said, it doesn't look like we are a fit. And that is a responsibility of the person doing the prospecting. Your job is to determine fit. Do you have a specific now in the MSP world, do you have a specific type of client you're working with or want to work with and you take everything else and push it out?
No, one of the things that I have said when I stepped into this role is that we're not going to change how we do business for one potential deal. I don't care how big it is. Maybe I should, but all of that to say, going back to what we talked about behind the scenes is if a client is not treating you or your team well, do you really want to date that person? Right? Is it worth however much money that it's going to bring. So I prefer not to deal with them. And if I have somebody on a call or even in person, I mean, in person, you know what, we're not a good fit, let's reconnect later. But on the phone, knowing that they are having a bad day, to Julian's point, they already picked up the phone. I mean, you have 10 seconds to really wow them. And I always just say, so Tracy, wow, it sounds like you've had a really bad day. What can I do to make it better? Hey, what's your favorite Starbucks? I will hand deliver it. Wait, where are you at again? And you get them laughing. And, then that kind of breaks the ice. And then they do just kind of say, oh my gosh, I just had whatever the situation was. And then I don't go into, here's why I'm calling. I'll just say, well, it sounds like you need a break. I call it getting unstuck. Go out and get some air, just step away for a moment. And I don't even want to bother you with why I'm calling. So would it be all right if we scheduled just 15 minutes? And they appreciate you recognizing that they need that space. And I will tell you 90% of the time they'll either say yes. So like, thank you so much for recognizing that. I'll give you 15 minutes. Let's schedule time on the calendar. Or they just say, you know what, just call me back another day. And that's fine. Those are your two options. So I always tell people, don't take anything personally. It's not
That's
you.
key to cold calling right there. It isn't about you. It isn't about you. It isn't about you. I want to talk for a couple of minutes. Yesterday I was at my first AI focused conference. I went to a conference called Sculpt, put on by Clay, and it's really eye-opening to see what is happening in the world of agentic AI for prospecting and the way that we build out the types of lists we want to talk to. So go ahead, Cody, and close the poll that we popped up about AI in prospecting. So prospecting and list building is the biggest, which was what I expected. Not using AI today, there's about 10% of you doing a little bit of forecasting, call notes and summaries, and a little bit of email personalization. Carrie, I want to get your take on email personalization because I think it's going to be a bit of a hot take. So can you talk to me as you built out the process for MSP process? Is AI part of that? Are you utilizing it or encouraging SDRs to utilize AI in that process?
No, we are not.
Tell me more.
So I think the challenge with AI, like anything, comes with if you are a subject matter expert in that thing, you can use AI to help you work smarter. If you don't know what you're talking about to begin with, using AI is just going to make everything worse faster. So is there a place for AI? Sure. And then let's not confuse AI and automation because I think there's lots of places where automation makes sense and AI would not. For example, you can ask AI to make you a list of prospects and good luck with that. It's going to stall out after 4 or 5 and then start making them up because it hallucinates, right? So I've tried to build prospect lists using AI. And the only reason I noticed that it was doing things wrong, and this even happens when I try and scan business cards into AI and have it make spreadsheets. It just starts making up the people's company names. And I noticed it because remember that big bag of 3,000 business cards we had? I paid my kids to scan them with ChatGPT this summer. And by like 150 into that pile, it was making up whatever the person's last name was and consulting. Everybody's company name, it was ariscoconsulting.com, simpsonconsulting.com, hoxonconsulting.com. Like it just starts randomly making stuff up. It can't be relied on. So if you have to have a human person go back and do it over, why not just have the human person do it right the first time? I think AI will get there. It isn't there yet. And we've probably got a good 5 years where we're still going to have to execute using our own brains. And even with writing content, for example, like I don't want to lose that skill because my conspiracy theory around AI is much like the Facebook. Right? We are the product, right? We are going to train this massive data set, and then they're going to make it prohibitively expensive for us to use. So unless you're an enterprise level organization, I think in 10 years you won't be able to afford AI. So you can't afford to lose the skills that you have right now. And I can feel myself getting dumber when I'm using AI. It's so easy to just push a button. You need to keep practicing the skills that you're going to need for your job, even if AI can help you with them.
Alan, your thoughts on where you would be using AI or looking at using AI in your sales process? Is there anywhere where you find that you are considering it?
Right. No, and I agree with Carrie to some extent, right? I do use AI extensively across the environment, but yes, when the data has to be completely accurate, right, with certain things, and Carrie's completely right, where if you still have to have a human validate and verify and it's not trustable, then don't use it there, right? So we do use AI in terms of like data consolidation. We have actually partnered with somebody that is building some lists, and it does seem to be good, right? So I think we are getting there faster than than expected. But we do use it in list building, data enrichment, trying to tie it in and have systems talk to each other, right? And having an agent grab data and put it into other areas. Email automation we started doing with that as well, but not necessarily the content. I completely agree on the content. I think we all are getting pretty good at knowing when it was created with AI, right? Those icons that are very typical, right? The rocket ship, the M dashes. I think everybody knows when something was written by AI. And so now you almost distrust it a little bit, right? I classify that vendor or the client or whoever's writing AI. I go, oh, they're just doing the lazy way. So yeah, I think somebody in chat was like, the rocket ships are 100%, right? And M dashes. So yeah, we use it everywhere we can, right?
I always tell my team, if a message to you starts with "Good morning, and I hope you had a great weekend," that it is definitely AI or I've been kidnapped and I need to be rescued. We've got about 3 minutes left. Julian, your top tip, and everybody think this through, your top tip for cold calling. What is it? If you could tell someone this is the one thing, what's your tip?
Smile.
Yes. Yes, I still have a mirror on my desk at home because I have to control my face. I sound a lot happier when I'm smiling.
I say,
Alan, your thoughts on your one tip? If you're going to prospect, cold call or otherwise, what's the one thing you want people to do?
Oh, for prospecting, I mean, I'm a big relationship person. I'm not the cold caller, right? But build relationships. That's how I've always grown my business. So.
Absolutely. So then what have you got for us?
I was just thinking if you want better results, you just have to treat prospecting like you're going to the gym. To Carrie's point, work the process. So sporadic workouts don't build strength. It actually makes you eat more. I'm a really good example of that. And sporadic outreach doesn't build a pipeline. So, what I do, and anybody like my team looks at my calendar and they just go, "Oh my gosh, how's your mind just not right?" That emoji. But I block time for everything every day. Just focus on those quality touches. Even in the CEO role, I still have to do that. And you just stick with it. So that consistency that you're building, it does compound. And that's what turns any outreach into a warm opportunity. So just be consistent.
Carrie, and I think you and I will share the exact same tip, so I'm going to offer it up, and it is pick up the phone. I have a Slack emoji and it says WWTD. And if someone asks me a question and I put that emoji in, it means go pick up the phone, because research gives you guesswork. Talking to a human gives you actual facts. And that is what cold calling is designed for, to find out what's really going on. I appreciate all of you being here today. We are at time. And there's a couple of questions in chat, guys, that I will follow up with you in the background on. There were some people looking for a little bit of resources. Carrie, we've got some stuff that I know you'll probably want to send around. I appreciate all of you taking the time to be with me today to talk through a little bit of the world of cold calling. I hope everybody has a great day.